the act of people living and working together to address common concerns, to shift narratives, to do something is itself art.
Yo, Munir. Creativity. The happiest guys on the internet. What's going on, brother? Yo, Munir.
I took an accounting class and I cried like daily because that was a language I did not speak. And then I got an A minus. I was like, oh, the brain works still. I can do this. But that was purpose driven because it tied into the tax code is where politics lives. It's where nonprofit policy and philanthropy lives, and that is what I love to do. And so it gave me some frameworks for things. I still don't. I'm not a practicing attorney, but I use it a lot in the angle it gives me. And I don't structure gift agreements and write white papers, but I could if I needed to, and it does inform. And every once in a while, I can be sitting around with a table full of people who are all the business experts, right? And they're like, I don't know if we can do that. And I'm like, well, I read the code, and we can, and here's why. And that's a bit like saying, like, I was also a D1 athlete, and I checked the IRS code. Like, it is it's kind of a flex. I won't lie.
It's the
Yeah.
influence. You mentioned sales,
Mhm.
Scrabble being sales,
Yeah.
and you went to get the information that you needed in order to influence and get
Hmm.
shit done.
Right. And fundraising is sales in a huge way. Like, you are selling a mission to someone, and it's a mission that may not even benefit them directly. It gets really hard sales. After law school, I interviewed at my dad's request with someone who was a legal headhunter, and to not practice law, but to be a headhunter for other lawyers. And this guy was sort of like, well, and he was doing it as a favor for my dad, I quickly realized. And he's like, kind of, and he didn't say sweetie, but the sweetie was implied. Um, this is really sales, and I just, you don't have a lot of experience with sales. Now, keep in mind, before law school, I had worked at Planned Parenthood, and I just looked at him and said, well, I don't know. I sold abortion rights to men, so I feel like I'm okay with sales. So I didn't get that job. Um,
Oh my goodness.
all for the best.
There's no bigger flex than what you've accomplished, and the way you can frame it.
Well, thank you for that. Thank
Yeah.
you. I've had to explain myself a lot on the why aren't you practicing law front. So I do have some, yeah.
Even better, you're using it to influence policy.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
At least influence a few people who influence policy, maybe sort of somehow. But
I was talking to a dear friend of mine, Amanda Williams, who's an artist from
mhm.
the south side of Chicago. And one of her first public works was painting houses that were marked on the south side of Chicago to be razed.
Ooh.
And she painted them in these vibrant colors of her childhood.
Mhm.
And it drew a lot of attention. And she took pictures because what ended
Mhm.
up being the art that came out of it were the pictures that she took of the work that her and her friends and the community and
Yeah,
family did in painting these houses.
writing this
And
down.
when I was researching you, I said, "Oh, Amanda, were you influenced by Rick?" And she said, 1,000%.
Yep.
And so I
Yep.
would love for you to share a little bit about the work that you've done
I love
with
it. Yeah.
Project Row Houses.
Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, I came to Project Row Houses to help with one project in 2017 as a consultant, and it is 2026. So that one project, you know, clearly is still going. And it's hard to know where to start talking about it. So like maybe I don't know if there's you might want to give me a less open-ended question, or I can just talk about it. So I
Well,
don't know.
I think so. If you could frame it first, provide us an introduction
Sure.
on Rick Lowe and the other artists' vision of creating
Yeah.
Project Row Houses, and then how you got involved and what was the project, if you can share,
Yeah,
that
definitely.
brought you to them.
So, Rick is one of 7 artists who are the co-founders of Project Row Houses, and he's often the most closely identified with it um, because he, as the youngest of them, and the one who, as they established it, really made it his day. I was going to call it his daily driver, but his daily job was being there, and the other artists were in the community and influences and very involved, but they were not there on a day-to-day basis. So people often talk about Rick. Rick is very gracious and always includes the other founders. I'm not gracious, like he's just honest, and including the other founders in that. But he is definitely the best known for this work. And Project Row Houses came about. So there's 7 Black artists in Houston in the late 80s, early 90s. They live in and around a neighborhood, Third Ward, which is a historically Black community, which was settled right after the Civil War, um, and it 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 was a massive part of a thriving Black Houston in the Jim Crow era. And after segregation, legal segregation ended, um, some people left the neighborhood because they finally could. And the people who leave, as in so many other places, are the people who can afford to leave. And so there was a combination of people leaving the neighborhood and the 70s stagflation, the oil bust in Houston in particular. And by the late 80s, early 90s, Third Ward was a pretty rundown inner city place. I mean, it was like, to be clear, it was not a place that someone like me would go. Um, it was a place you thought was dangerous. And so that's the context for the neighborhood. And then here are these Black artists in that time frame. And it's the 80s, it's the 90s, racism is over, right? Of course it's not really. And they find that they are still struggling to be accepted in mainstream practice. I mean, they're welcome from time to there are exhibits. It's not blatant, but it is, you're never just an artist, you're a Black artist. You're never just an artist, you're a woman artist kind of a world. And we still have that to an extent. Um, so they're like, well, why are we fighting to be part of a community that isn't fighting to have us in? Um, and where is our story in this? And even like this even ties back to like this art versus craft and who defines it and the Western canon, right? Because like there's a lot of art in the world that was not recognized as art. And in fact, so Third Ward has a historically Black college, Texas Southern University, and in the 40s, a professor was recruited there by a wealthy white woman from one of the big oil companies to be a professor there, an artist named John Biggers. He was a huge influence on one of 2 artistic influences on the founders. He got a UNESCO fellowship to go study art in Africa in, oh my God, I'm going to forget the year, 59, 62 ish. Like it was the first time they gave anyone a fellowship to study art not in Europe. Like, what? So so he was an influence of on theirs, and he in fact taught Rick and some other people. And then there's a German artist, Joseph Beuys, who developed this concept of what he called social sculpture. And what he meant by that um, is, and I can't read German, so I'm relying on all the translations, right? Is that the act of people living and working together to address common concerns, to shift narratives, to do something, is itself art. Just living and doing things in community is art. And so here they are talking in this heady space about social sculpture and Joseph Beuys, and they're talking about how Dr. Biggers, their mentor, has like brought the sort of architectural vernacular of Third Ward into his art, and also the influence of Western Africa into it. And they're talking about disinvestment in the neighborhood. And Rick finds himself on one of these bus tours by city leaders going through Third Ward, a neighborhood where he's already working and practicing. And they drive down this block, and the guy at the bus is like, points to this row of shotgun shacks which we called them growing up, little row houses, and says, this is the most dangerous block in Third Ward. These houses should be razed. They should be. It's probably like your friend Amanda, like the same type of situation. Like, we just need this gone because what is here? And they're trap houses. And I don't think they called them trap houses then, but um, bad things were happening there and they were falling apart, is really what I'm saying. And Rick looks at this and he's like, this is the bones of our culture and our community. This is the architectural vernacular of the neighborhood in a very specific and place-based way. And went back to his colleagues and they were like, how do we know? You don't get to tear it down and start over. So they got together with, like, oddly enough, a wacky mix of the Menil Collection, which is a phenomenal art museum here, driven by a family, an oil family, the Schlumbergers and some others, and Chevron and the NEA and a couple major foundations, and they bought 22 little row houses in the middle of Third Ward, and they were like, "Great, we are going to make this a space for where Black artists can come and create." And that's and it's gotten bigger than that because of this concept of social practice. But that's how it began as a place in the neighborhood for art, and that uh, it's also loaded because that too is that's imposing a narrative there of a very, like, the concept of, look, you walk into a neighborhood and you're like, we're doing social sculpture. This is social practice. And people are like, what is that? Like, you all went to school and learned about art, but what is it? What is it doing here? What is social practice is not just we do art in a place where you don't expect it. It's actually, and I think Rick found this challenge. It is, I think it shaped his practice clearly, is what does social practice truly mean? It's not just art, because you have to have that people working together part of it. So what are they working on? Because not everyone is an artist, even if you say they're an artist. Not everyone feels like their life is a creative practice. And so how do you balance the sort of high art language of praxis and, like, like, just using the word praxis is so obnoxious. But
He
it
tells the
became
story
its place, right?
to tie
Yeah,
into what you're saying. He does tell a story about a student coming up to him and saying, if you're artists and creatives, why can't you create solutions? Because we already know what the problems are.
bingo. Yeah. And that is really the essence of this now 32, 33-year-old conversation in Third Ward around Project Row Houses, because we are an arts organization, and we have sort of a continuum of programs that nurture creativity, from youth art programs to studio spaces for college students who otherwise wouldn't have a private studio space while they're earning their degree, to sort of business of art for artists and creatives who want to be a professional. It's hard to be a professional artist, and you have to still know how to invoice people and how to, archive your stuff and all that. And then we have opportunities to show your art at various levels. And now around the country, there's like a generation of Black artists in particular, but artists from a lot of historically marginalized communities who've come through PRH. Like, there's a generation of artists that we fostered. And then there's what you saw, because what Amanda Williams was involved in, and she knew Rick, and there's now Theaster Gates and Mark Bradford and all of these people. We had this super gratifying experience a couple of years ago where a foundation from Minneapolis sent us a $5,000 check. The Lulu Foundation. They're literally one of my favorite foundations because we hopped on a call with them. We were like, hi, thank you so much. Hey, Lulu Foundation of Minneapolis, what made you send us money? And they were like, well, we've been funding this organization and this organ, and they're naming some of the places we know. And when we asked them what got them started, they would say Project Row Houses. And we figured we better come find you. And they are such a thoughtful partner with us, as much as the Ford Foundation is. Because they're seeing the connection there, and they're seeing the cultivation of community and how it's specific to a place, but that can also translate out to other places. So what that means, the challenge from the student to Rick is we do all this art, but that's not all the community needs or wants. And so uh, one reason we have the youth art programs is we think art is great for kids, but also the reality is in a neighborhood that has been, um, gone through a century and a half of civic isolation and disinvestment, not surprisingly, the public schools aren't great. And what gets cut from the public school budget, even now? Art. But there are all of these studies that say kids, especially low income kids, especially black and brown low income kids, when they have art education, they are more likely to advance grade wise, they are more likely to graduate, they get better grades, they have fewer disciplinary interactions, and they have better social emotional learning. And so we're not giving those kids that. Well, Project Row Houses is going to give those kids that because they're our kids, like they're our neighbors. And during the pandemic, when we asked people what they needed, because we had just started this great, what we thought was going to be a great program, where we were going to bring art and artists into sort of financial education and credit recovery and some things like that. And there was a need in the neighborhood for it that had been identified through groups and through conversations, and then the pandemic hit and everything changed. And people were like, we need food. So like we have a grocery distribution now. Um, because you're like creativity and art is great, but like you've got to eat, man. So and no one else is there doing it. And now we have a platform, and now people know us, so we can do that. Um, so that's part of what goes on there. Uh, it's just it is hard to describe and wonderful to immerse yourself in, and I love that they just keep saying, "Oh, could you also help with this?" Right? Like could so I feel really lucky to be working there. It's
I'd
a
like
really
to
great
read you
place.
something that encapsulates what I think you've been talking about. And we'll go back to Rick Lowe.
Yeah.
And he said, social sculpture is the way we shape and mold the world around us.
It really is. I mean, and that's philanthropy for me. That's why I see it as activism, or as the tool I use to carry out my activism. Um, I think I gotta tell you, I had never heard the phrase stakeholder capitalism, and so I Googled it. Um, and I feel like there is a really interesting compare and contrast deep dive that could happen with stakeholder capitalism and socially engaged art.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
So that's like a different. I tried to the the book is not available at the library. I mean, it's like I'm on hold for the book, so I can't read it yet. I mean, I suppose just buy the book, but I'm again in the trying not to acquire stuff. So uh, yeah,
Sounds like there's a project in our
Well,
future.
there may be.
and a follow up conversation. There's a group also called the Mondrian Group, which
Hmm. After Pete, the
no,
artist. Okay.
no, it's more like a dragon, I think, in Spain. But the
Oh.
idea, or maybe in Mexico, and I apologize for not knowing, but the concept of social structure where they are pro-social in what they do,
Hmm.
and profits go driven back into the community, back into the area in which they live, and it's and productivity and jobs, and then the
Hmm.
collective basically owns the company, and
Yeah.
everybody that works for the company owns the company, and so it becomes
Hmm.
this pro social, but it's an organization,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a virtuous cycle, if you will.
Hmm.
But
I mean, we see that with the Eldorado, which is one of our projects, right? That we really feel like this is a ballroom that was built in 1939, and was given to Project Row Houses in 1999, and we completed a $10 million historic rehab of it in 2023. Um, and that I tell people all the time, like technically we own the building, but we really hold that space in trust for the community, for what it represents. And we are trying to get better every day at truly using it as a community resource. It's hard when resources are scarce. That's an issue with philanthropy and this kind of philanthropy and this kind of social practice. But that is, we are holding space for what used to be there, not so it can be a museum to what used to be there, but so that it can foster the next generation of that energy and that history and that culture and welcome new people into it because the neighborhood has changed radically, even in the time I've been involved. But yeah, that reinvestment is, I mean, for us, a translation there is sort of, everyone talks about revitalizing communities and economic redevelopment. And I'm like, yes, inclusive economic revitalization. So you're not displacing what made the neighborhood a place people wanted to come in the first place, right? Like it's hard to do that. But if you have intentional conversations about it, and if you embed artists in that, and you bring creativity to it, and creative problem solving to it, it becomes easier. Because then it's a dialogue, and you can't just get away with something. Hopefully.
As we've come to find with our guests, we can typically do 2, 3, 4 episodes with them alone. And what I'm hearing you say to me can take us down another path. But when I think about Amanda Williams, she's a trained architect.
Mm-hmm.
And she started her career as an architect before becoming an artist. And so space, design, color are all so important to her work.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing about, inclusive investment adds to not just building things to build them because there's a need, but to emphasize the importance of design and how that space feels and makes people feel. And to have that as part of the conversation is so important. Thank you.
I have a project I can't talk about yet, but I can allude to it obliquely, and maybe I can get the other person involved in it to come talk to y'all at some point, because that person is a visionary. But there's we're at the dawn of an era, certainly in Houston, I think in a lot of other places, where there is about to be massive upheaval of civic infrastructure because of things reaching the end of their useful life, notably the highway systems that were all built in the 50s and used in the 50s as a tool to enforce segregation. And in Houston, we're about to take down a huge part of a major freeway that cut some historic Black communities off from other communities. And everyone says, oh, it's going to be the new High Line. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's actually not. We're not going to put people up in the air in Houston because we would roast them to death. But it's going to create opportunities. And what this project is sort of hoping to build towards is how do we put artists and architects and craftspeople and people with an artistic sensibility to their skilled trades even on the front end of that civic redesign and rebuild, so that civic art is not only we put paint on the outside of a building after the fact, but how is it what you just said, where it's attuned to the community and designed at community scale in an inclusive fashion and a reverential fashion that is nevertheless functional and facilitates what we need to do to go forward without erasing what we left.
Well said.
Yeah, so that's I hope to somehow be involved in work like that in one sense, and to help the actual artists who are doing that work. Yeah. I love helping them. So I hope they think I'm helpful.
This is incredibly helpful. And speaking of helpful, we've spoken about the fact that you found your creativity and acknowledged or embraced your own creativity. What are 3 things that our listeners could take away about creativity, lessons that they could learn from you?
Whew. Well, I mean, that that being curious is a practice, and that you have to practice it. Um, and that challenging yourself is painful but necessary. You have to ask hard questions, like asking myself, did everyone think I should be a lawyer because I was a jerk and I argued a lot? Oof. Um, I was challenged by someone the other day in a meeting, and I, after the meeting, looked at my colleague and said, "Does that person bother me because they're so much like me, and I'm that annoying too?" And I said, "And don't answer." I was like, "That's a question for my self-reflection later." And she said, "I think that's really brave of you to reflect on that." And I thought, I am the asshole. Um, sorry.
Oh my
So, um, I think the third thing is like sometimes you gotta rest. You gotta stop. You can feel a sense of urgency. I feel it more and more every day. And also when I make time to rest, we're not good at that. We don't allow ourselves that luxury, but you just have to. So,
Love it. Absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you.
The great
Yeah.
pause.
It really is. It really is. And I need that rest because I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next. And it's only when I'm still that I can make time to proactively shape and call into being sort of where I'm trying to get my next growth area, I don't know, to be. Um,
Oh, this has been a soul cleansing conversation. Thank you.
Which
it has
means
been
that now
good
is the
reflecting on
time
this.
for us
Yeah.
to raise up
Do we
with
dance? Oh, I'm sorry.
a little mixtape. No, we got to find out
Karaoke.
what's on your mixtape.
It should have been your karaoke go-tos now that we've
Now that
uncovered.
that'll
Rob,
be
you
part
and I
2.
have something in common, and that is both a Spotify playlist and a note in my notes app. Although my
How
notes
did you,
app for
did Munir tell
karaoke,
you that? What,
yeah,
how
I
did
think you
this?
said it in one of your podcasts. I did my research.
Oh,
I
oh
did my
my.
research. And my notes app list is not only the songs, but the last date I sang them. Because part of my challenge, I have friends, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I am not here to judge anyone else's creative practice. But there are people who they have a song they sing at karaoke, and that's great. And I love the challenge of iteration, and that's what that is, and that's beautiful. For me, my challenge is what else can I sing? And so my first pick for my playlist for this purpose, I don't know if you know this about me, Munir, I was actually also a DJ in high school. And so making me pick 3 songs is like both fabulously fun and horrific to
Yes.
narrow down. It was very hard. But so my first pick is from my karaoke list, and it is the song that uh, it pushes me. Like, this is a song where if I am in good voice or slash have had some bourbon without ice, that I can probably do it. But it can like really easily veer into the key of like, good Lord, get this woman off the stage because it is painful. I think that it was, uh, who produced the Ramones and like the Ronettes, like Spector. I think he's the one, but maybe it's Motown guy too, Barry Gordy, who like you're supposed to push to the edge of your range. And so for me, the song "Band of Gold" by Freda Payne is like at the very edge of my natural range. And if I can nail it, it is like swinging a boat. And if I don't, it is like running into a stump. But you have to try. You have to try. I thought, okay, so we're talking about PRH and my true love of doing this work because, I mean, also something about that work for me is that it is about like I almost think of it as like cultural reparations And there's a lot in our country that people who look like me have to atone for, and some people don't want to address that. And like if I can address that in some fashion, I want to. So I love that I've been given the opportunity to work there for that. So I wanted to shout out something that had a tie to that and to Houston. So shouting out H-Town, Scarface, who was in the Ghetto Boys.
There
Now,
was.
Ghetto Boys are Fifth Ward, not Third Ward. Fifth Ward's on the north side, um, but we love them anyway. Uh, and actually, I think that Brad Jordan is Scarface. He ran for city council recently. As you do, because that's apparently where old rappers go to reinvent. Um, he did a song called "My Block," which is like note perfect, and it's this description of growing up on the south side of Houston because he grew up on the south side. It's a beautiful song, but actually, then I'm going to be like pedantic and tedious. And the version of My Block that really was speaking to me as I was developing this list is one that I don't actually know if you can find a recording of, because at the Project Row House's 30th anniversary gala, we had a performer, Jason Moran, a jazz pianist of some note, who's from Houston, perform. And he closed his set with this instrumental medley. He started out with the old standard, "It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing." And I'm listening to it. I'm on the edge of the tent and I'm like working. And all of a sudden I hear something in it and I'm like, get out. And it segues into My Block. And the crowd
Wow.
goes wild because like this is so Houston. I think there's some recordings of him doing just My Block with Robert Glasper, who's another contemporary performer from Houston. But that medley that night in that space, we were at Emancipation Park, which was a park that was purchased in the 1870s by formerly enslaved people, so they would always have a place to celebrate Juneteenth. And him tying that to it was just like it blew my mind. So that's on my playlist because it's a fantasy playlist because we might not be able to actually put it on a playlist. And the third was then really hard. Like, where do you go from there, right? And so I'm a writer as part of my creative practice, trying to write more and more. And I thought, okay, one standout for me among many, there's a Jackson Browne song called Fountain of Sorrow. And there's a line in it. And first of all, as my friend Karen said, it is one of the best. I thought there was an us there, but there never was, and isn't that tragic songs. So beautiful song for a breakup. But the first few lines are, looking through some photographs I found inside a drawer. I was taken by a photograph of you. And I love the wordplay in that, like the super tight poetry of taken by a photograph instead of photograph taken by. I don't know. I just like that. Maybe that's only profound to me. Maybe that song has some sort. So my honorable mention, because I'm sorry you get four, is Jimmy Cliff's "You Can Get It If You Really Want It," um, from one of the best soundtrack albums ever, from the Heart of It Camp. So that's my playlist.
I feel like my playlist could just be a reaction to your playlist, but I
That's
I
a
I,
conversation. That's a
I
practice.
I'm going to say something that references back to your first 3 minutes or so, and when you invoked Dartmouth. It has taken me an hour and 14 minutes to mention the University of Michigan, which is my alma mater,
Go
and
Wolverines?
go
Is that the right
blue.
blue? Okay,
Go
I
blue,
couldn't
yeah,
remember.
that
I know
that
it's
that would
blue
be
and
the
gold because
yeah,
I work with a lot of Michigan people.
maize and blue.
So,
So yeah, that's okay. But when you mentioned the Ghetto Boys, famously the Fab Five, because two of the five, which was this famous collection of freshman basketball players at the University of
mhm.
Michigan in 1991, Ray Jackson and Jimmy King were from Texas, and they loved the Ghetto Boys. And
Mhm.
so the Ghetto Boys were the soundtrack of this Michigan basketball team. And so I totally connect
Excellent.
to that. And I appreciate that. And then I think about Nora Jones's podcast, um, playing along, and even before that. And she had Robert Glasper on, and her connection. I think they went to high school together. The performing Booker T.
High School for
Washington
Performing
performing.
Arts, yeah.
Yeah. So this
Yeah.
is wonderful. But I would be remiss to not mention Erykah Badu and Tyrone, which is one of my favorite live recordings of any song ever. I also,
Yeah.
when thinking about this show and doing some research, Living Color, Open Letter to a Landlord. Is it on your list, Munir? Is it on your list? I was worried about my list because of potential overlap. But wow, now you can tear a building down, but you can't erase a memory. The open of that song is so powerful. What a tremendous band. And I'm going to go with Natalie Merchant, Kind and Generous. It is such a thoughtful and gracious song filled with gratitude that I thought it would be a lovely way to celebrate our time with you.
That's a beautiful
So
one.
thank you for your time.
Munir? So I like Andrea, I had quite a few songs on my list, maybe just in case one of them was repeated. So it's good that I did that.
Right.
I'm going to start with Move On Up, Curtis Mayfield, 1970.
Also
Move
on my list.
Keep On Wishing. Remember Your Dream Is Only Scheme, so keep on pushing. Johnny Appleseed, Joe Strummer and the Mescaleros, 2001. Boys planted 7,000 oaks in Castle as social sculpture, and Strummer's song is, if you're after getting the honey, hey, then you don't go killing all the bees. So, and the namesake of that song, Johnny Appleseed, went out and did pro-social things throughout America. And then I'm going to go with Hate Street Dialogue, Rodriguez, but the version that Avener did in 2015. So Rodriguez, Sixto Rodriguez was, there was this documentary, Searching for Sugar Man.
Yeah.
So he was an artist in the 70s and he disappeared, but like somebody had his album in South Africa. And so all these South Africans grew up with like Rodriguez music, but nobody else knew who the heck he was. And they found him in Detroit. And this song was about police brutality in the 60s and Hate Street in San Francisco. But, it's Rodriguez has that way of just encapsulating feeling in a very powerful way. So I'm really excited. We can definitely have a part 2. We're gonna keep this going because we want to hear more about the super secret project and also explore some of those tangents together.
Yeah. Oh my God, the tangents. I live in the tangents. I live for the tangents. Who doesn't? If you don't, you are boring. Let's just be clear.
That was when you talked about the fuzziness, like law was too literal or.
And funny, the law isn't, the people in law school were. I'm a little judgy. I can't put it behind me completely.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. I will hopefully see you soon.
Yes, for sure.